welcome Tyler James from Cannabis Amnesty, who is actually going to talk to us about some of the lobbying efforts on behalf of that organization. The federal government has just legalized cannabis as of October 17th. Cannabis will no longer be a crime. However, we still have a lot of people in this country with cannabis records. We still have people that are serving that have cannabis arrests on their record. We still have people going through the court system. In some provinces, we still have people in jail for cannabis crimes. And there are more, because of the actual Cannabis Act, there are some cannabis crimes that will actually, under the new laws, be actually worse than what they were under Prohibition as far as dealing outside of the legal market. So we are very, very happy to be discussing this. And so we are welcome Tyler James. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy, for that wonderful introduction. For those who don't know, I've been involved in the cannabis space prior to the Campaign for Amnesty with an organization by the name of Sensible Ontario. That campaign is under the Ontario Cannabis Consumer and Retail Alliance, which I'm very graciously a part of. Some of the other directors include Abby Roach from the Hotbox Cafe, Lisa Campbell, CEO of Lipford Cannabis Solutions, as well, Imra Kovac as well, as entrepreneur based out of Vancouver. To Tracy's point as well, there have been and there will continue to be a lot of offenses that one could commit under the new legislation under Bill C-45 and also C-46 that hinder one's ability to both consume and then also if they were to then want to transfer cannabis product from, let's say from one location to another, from one person to another. But because of the nuances of that, we're actually going to just be more so focusing retrospectively, looking back on the offenses that have already been committed and individuals who already have cannabis charges and convictions that they're seeking amnesty for. And as it says, we're trying here to really right history's wrongs because there are a lot of situations in which these individuals have a lot of hindrances from their abilities not only to gain meaningful employment, but also for their freedom of movement, which we'll be getting into further a bit more as well. So really the Campaign for Amnesty, what we're really looking at doing is we're really looking to call on the government to recognize that fairness and equality are demanded in enacting the legislation and that they need to really delete the records that they have of individuals for these non-minor cannabis offenses that they have. Now the context. Individuals that have these convictions, as I mentioned, they have issues really participating in the workforce and gaining meaningful employment. They have issues traveling to places like the U.S., as I'm sure some of you have heard or may know somebody affected. And as well, they even have issues sometimes volunteering within their community. To participate, let's say, at the school board where your child is, there's certain things that unfortunately are required from them, such as background checks, and it's really up to the discretion of those school boards if they want to allow for your participation. And we'll be getting into that a bit more as well. But really, the public sentiment has shown that a majority of Canadians in a recent poll support amnesty for nonviolent cannabis offenses. So it's really, looking at the campaign, calling on ourselves as Canadians to be the driving force behind the change that we want to see. Addressing amnesty really is the first step in which the campaign is looking to, start the process of seeking amnesty for these individuals. The issue, though, is MP Bill Blair has stated that the discussions around amnesty will not commence until Bill C-45 and C-46, are kind of enacted, which is taking place on October 17th. However, our stance with the campaign is that there really is no need to wait until that time in which to have those conversations around amnesty. I had even the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Blair in person, and they seemed quite adamant that their plate was too full and that handling these kind of conversations was just more efficient in terms of doing so after legislation. However, ourselves and other interest groups that we're working with and nonprofits, really have been advocating to government to take heed of what we've been doing within the community and to work with us in unison so that we can get some of the heavy lifting out of the way for them in terms of introducing this type of legislation and at least starting the conversation around amnesty. Now, down the line, one of the issues that we're really going to see as a secondary challenge, as well as the implementation of actual amnesty. The first step, obviously, being the introduction of the actual legislation itself. But then thereafter, the actual implementation of amnesty will be one of the greatest challenges for reasons that we're going to get into. But it's also due to just a few points due to the fact that records are kept both digitally, but then also hard record in paper form as well, and sometimes those files are not centralized, making them harder to get at. There's also different police divisions in different provinces that keep records of every incident or encounter that they've had with an individual that relates to cannabis, and that necessarily isn't on your criminal record, but it's a record of the incident and the interaction that you had with police as it pertained to cannabis as well. We'll be getting and we'll be speaking a bit more about the issues surrounding implementation a bit further on. And the last being really the cost. Under the Harper government, they have increased the cost for a pardon almost 5 times. And for individuals who are seeking amnesty, this is an issue because unfortunately there have been disproportionate targeting of individuals from low-income areas, people of color, and indigenous people, and this becomes another barrier for them gaining, access to the workforce and gaining the ability of freedom of movement. Because if you're from a low-income community, the cost of a pardon being $631, and then the processing time in which for that pardon to be granted are one that unfortunately these individuals do not have available to them in most cases. Now, this is just a timeline of how things are going to be progressing over, the next year, and where we're really trying to slot in this discussion around amnesty to make sure that we can effectively have this legislation introduced in a time frame in which it helps to benefit these people the most, given the profiteering that's happening within the cannabis space right now. You have legislation, obviously Bill C-45 and Bill 174 passing, which is more so Ontario. October 17th is the implementation for C-45. Bill 174 is already implemented. By the fall of this year, our group is looking at really having and completed the draft legislation around amnesty in hand, and we'll be looking at introducing that to and presenting that to government with some advocates and other political figures that are looking at working with our campaign. However, this is the part in which and the time frame in which we're looking at getting this legislation both introduced and passed, because there will be the introduction of micro licensing and cultivation that will be coming online, and the importance of the introduction of micro licensing and cultivation, it's allowing the opportunity for the craft growers out there to transition into the legal market space. However, for these craft growers that potentially may have cannabis convictions, there's some trepidation to their ability to apply, regardless of the government's wording that they're kind of opening it to everybody, even with past convictions. That's still not a guarantee that if you have a past conviction, you will be allowed or you will be granted. You'll be granted a license. So it's really important that, again, with what we're doing with our campaign, that we really get a good groundswell of support, because it's within these the next year or so where there's really going to be more of the opportunity for inclusion that we don't want anybody with a cannabis conviction to be excluded from. And that's also because, as well, by this time next year, they'll be introducing the regulations around vaped products and around edibles. And again, there's still very many craft producers out there, and even recreational consumers that have unfortunate convictions for derivative products. And seeing as the introduction of these products will be taking place, next year for them to then become legal for their consumption and for their sale, we think it's only advantageous that, again, trying to work within this timeline, these individuals with these cannabis convictions are granted their amnesty. And lastly, we're really trying to get it pushed, and get amnesty on board and passed sooner than later because of the federal elections that will be taking place in October of next year, on the 21st. As you can imagine, and as you've seen, I'm sure, with the provincial elections here in Ontario, it is quite a show. It's quite a circus to some degree in terms of the ramping up to it. And the issue that we see, or at least that I'm predicting, is that as we get closer to the federal election, all parties will be shifting focus away from actual legislation and policy and focusing more so on campaigning for the election in cases of the premier, in cases of Justin Trudeau, our prime minister, the getting reelected. So if we have to wait until after the federal election for the legislation for amnesty to get passed, we're then pushing out the opportunity again for individuals with these convictions of, to achieve freedom of movement. And not only that, but also within this time frame, as you can see, there's many opportunities in which there's going to be continued profiteering off this space, which is, again, a great thing that I think it's not to be okay, I guess you'd say it's nothing that we're really harmful for, that we think is a problem, but we just feel that with the opportunity for microcultivation and the integration of both edibles and vaped products, these individuals that have these convictions should at least be given the opportunity to participate in this space of inclusion. Next, the affected, just so that people can get a sense of who actually is affected by this. In the past 15 years, Canadian police agencies have reported to over 800,000 incidences related to cannabis. And that's data gathered from StatsCan. As I was mentioning to Tracy before, these incidences are, although not on your criminal record, they are kept on a criminal file. So the issue with that is whenever you've had a run-in with police, they keep a file of it and they document that encounter. However, if it is recorded that cannabis was found on you, or they hinted the smells of cannabis, those could be put in the notes when you had that incident, and on subsequent encounters with the police or any type of enforcement, they will then see their notes, and it's again up to their discretion if they want to or force you to under any more searches. And again, this is a massive issue because for individuals in low-income areas, and given the disproportionate arrests and convictions of people of color and Indigenous people, this is something that unfortunately it keeps them within that cycle of continued enforcement. Because say that they, again, I'm not saying that if they see a cannabis conviction, they will decline your application for acceptance. But again, on a case-by-case basis, it's something that potentially could be a hindrance to somebody gaining, higher levels of education just because of a cannabis conviction that they may have. The other issue with pardons is that even though they might be granted, it doesn't fully eliminate the records that you have. As I mentioned, there are still trails of that with your encounters with the police. So really what our campaign is going to be pushing for isn't just for pardons, but the real record expungement, so that your incidences and encounters with police and enforcement are completely wiped away as well. Now, one of the biggest issues with the convictions is the ability to gain meaningful employment, not just in the legal cannabis sector, which right now there's, to be quite honest, a shortage of a shortage of available candidates for the opportunities in this space, but in other sectors as well, the cannabis conviction does hinder one's ability to gain meaningful employment. For instance, the transportation sector, which is great employers. Truck drivers generally make anywhere between $80,000 to $100,000 a year. But the issue is, though, if you're a truck driver, in order to get that great salary and the full benefits, generally you have to be doing cross-border work. Cross-border work meaning that you can haul product from Hamilton, let's say, from the steel mills down to wherever in the U.S. And I work with trucking companies, and one of their concerns is if they have an individual who has a past cannabis conviction, the fear that these trucking company owners have is that it then will hinder their ability to work more efficiently for their client. Because if your truck driver has a cannabis conviction and he's at the border trying to get his truck of, let's say, steel from Hamilton down to Texas or wherever it has to go, it's up to the discretion of those border agents if they want to let that truck driver across the border, or if they want to hold up that truck, or if they want to search that truck. So for individuals who not even just are looking for white collar jobs on Bay Street or in a hospital, it's really even blue collar jobs and those opportunities for meaningful employment that really affect individuals on a daily basis from really gaining, some opportunity to upward economic mobility within their own life. And again, we see this with the Trump administration. It's really up to them if they want to stop you at the border. Now, here's just some comparable data on the cost of prohibition. A lot of this data is taken from the U.S., and it just goes to show that majority of the budgets for the states and for the country was really to impose this prohibition on cannabis. The reefer madness is just that, quite mad in terms of the numbers that they've invested into subduing individuals and the cost that it brings to taxpayers. Now, under the Freedom of Information Act, our campaign has asked the government for some numbers on the cost that is associated with a charge and a conviction for Canadians that unfortunately have charges, but that data has not yet been released. And the reason why we're looking for that is because it doesn't just, cannabis convictions don't just burden the police force with these frivolous this frivolous paperwork, but it also backs up our court systems as well. And the issues in backing up our court system is that once a judge has too much things on his plate, or if a judge has to deal with meaningless cases such as this, it prolongs the trial date for other more serious crimes and offenses that go to trial. And if you read in the newspaper, there's been many situations and instances in which there have been declared mistrials because a more serious case, the offenses of which could have been determined by a judge, had to have been thrown out because they couldn't get that trial to court in time. And this just goes to show the failings of our court system if we allow for minor cannabis charges to then get brought into the court system. Canada has a great legal system. We have great attorneys that are willing to support and fight on behalf of the people constitutionally, like, as everybody knows, Jack Loy, Kirk Tusaw. However, everybody has their limit, and we have to all play our part in making sure that the court system can be a functioning machine, well-oiled machine, but when it's backed up and clogged up with minor cannabis convictions and charges, it doesn't really operate in everybody's best interests. So it's really another issue that we're trying to address here by offering amnesty. Now we're just going to get at some of the solutions that I think we could adopt. In California, on the May 23rd, the city of Oakland launched the Equity 1 permit. Oakland has been disproportionately targeted on the war on drugs, and the people of Oakland and their municipality took it on themselves to find ways in which they can not only just reintegrate individuals with past cannabis convictions, but also provide a way of offering these individuals upward economic mobility given their experience with the product. So the Equity 1 permit allows for individuals who have been targeted on the war on drugs within the past 20 years that lived within those areas to then be given opportunities for gaining retail space and also funding to start up their cannabis business. Massachusetts is doing the same with their social equity program. and that's built, trying to build a great pathway for individuals to enter the legal cannabis space by reducing the barriers to entry into the commercial cannabis industry, regardless of speciality of their background. It provides professional and technical services, and it really promotes sustainability, social and economic practices as well when it's as it pertains to the commercial and retail side of cannabis. This was also provided by them. A lovely a woman by the name of Shalene Title is actually the one that assisted in drafting legislation that I've been in conversation with, and she, with her campaign, drafted up this little picture, which I think really helps to represent what both Cannabis Amnesty is looking for, and what they've been able to achieve in the U.S. And that's because, it's not just about equality, but giving everybody the ability to enter the space, but equity, giving everybody the ability to participate in the space. Because when you have, low-income communities, you're going to have individuals there who don't necessarily have the means to participate, but have everything else. Have the determination, have the capability to participate. So it's about, municipalities and provinces trying to, offer the ability to give these groups economic mobility. So this is really great in terms of representing how low-income communities would be able to participate through organizations run in their community that are government funded. For instance, the incubators that are held through Oakland and the Equity One program would give a stipend to these companies to, kind of get rent space, get some product, and then it's kind of paid back over time. So in terms of how individuals could help the campaign, and what we're really looking for is, first, we're looking for some signatures. Our goal is to hit 10,000 signatures. With those signatures, where you can sign up through our site, we're looking at kind of presenting that with some of the legislation right now it's being drafted on how amnesty could be introduced and tabled. We really, and the attorneys on our campaign, Anna Maria Nenajor and Stephanie Di Giuseppe, have been working very hard at this. And I really can't wait to see the finished product, because they want, and what they're trying to do is take the heavy lifting out of the hands of government, so that they can kind of just pass this as quickly as possible. Really, the campaign is also needing awareness. Individuals who are, interested in following us on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, we really hope that you engage with us. You share with us your cannabis story, how cannabis has affected your life positively or negatively, or how you've seen it affect others around you, how it's affected your business. Really, this is, all about an awareness campaign as well, because it's about educating people on how those within your own community, maybe even somebody has been affected by this war on drugs. And at times, what I'm finding is that a lot of people are still stigmatized by it, to the point where they're scared to even share those stories, because they're fearful of either how people might perceive them, or how potentially it could get back to an employer who will then perceive it more negatively, and the consequences on how that could potentially impact them. So we're actually doing My Cannabis Story hashtag right now, where we're featuring different individuals on and they're pretty much sharing their stories on how they've been affected by cannabis, positively or negatively. And as well, just really having these conversations here. We are actively engaging all levels of government on conversations around how they can be more inclusive, and how they can support our cause to create more equality in this emerging market that's coming up as well. Now I'm just going to share with you one of the My Cannabis stories that we have. This is Jordana Goldlist. Jordana Goldlist wanted to share her cannabis story because when she was a minor, her first charge, she didn't have any information presented to her when she was caught with about a half a gram joint. They pled guilty for an absolute discharge, but they didn't even have a lawyer present with them at the time. And speaking with individuals, that's a very similar story and a very similar pattern that we're hearing, that unfortunately, they didn't have an attorney present. They were told just to accept an offer, and not really knowing how to navigate the court system, they thought that would be the best outcome for them and the less trouble. So she obviously accepted. On her second charge, she also pled guilty, but this was for a trafficking cannabis and the proceeds of crime offense. For this, she received a conditional discharge and was put on 2 years probation. But again, in this scenario, she didn't have a lawyer present to represent her best interests, and that's generally, unfortunately, when you're looking at some of these groups that are disproportionately targeted, coming from low-income areas, they might not have the means to attain proper representation, which means they then get thrown in the spiral of being put in the system. And again, once you're put in the system, even if you're still on probation, it unfortunately it gives more opportunity for you to then have more encounters with police that are negative. When Jordana was 18, she fortunately had completed her probation, but was homeless and was a high school dropout at the time. So there was very much the opportunity for her to fall back into that cycle, being a vulnerable youth at that time. So what she did, she took it on herself to become an attorney and to assist others to educate them, so to say now, my apologies, on ways of not getting stuck in the court system. So I just wanted to share some of the endorsers that we now have on our campaign that are supporting us. We were fortunate enough that Jody Emery has supported us. As you know, she's been a great advocate and proponent in the space for fairness, equality, inclusion, and it was really great to really hear her speak and to offer herself some advice to our campaign. We also were fortunate that DJ NDN from a tribe called Red was able to assist us. He has been able to review, what we've presented to them on the unfortunate, disproportionate targeting of Indigenous people as it relates to cannabis. So he felt really proud to support our cause, and we felt very fortunate that he would join us. Because as he puts it, legalization without amnesty is oppressive monopolization. And as well, Kirk Tusaw. Kirk, I've been fortunate enough to even see some of his work and to see him work firsthand, and he is a great attorney in terms of what he's doing. And he has been a big advocate for the cannabis sector and for the cannabis space. And it just goes to show, in this sector, when you're trying to do good and really have, a really meaningful cause, you will surround yourself with the right people, and the right people will find you as well. And we also were fortunate to get an endorsement and support from Terry Lake. Terry Lake is the former health minister from BC, and he's also the VP of Corporate Social Responsibility from Hydro Apothecary. I actually was in a Globe and Mail article with Terry Lake because he was doing some work around the research of cannabis as an effective opiate and opioid substitute. At the time, I was working with a group by the name of Eden Medicinal Society. They're a organization that had dispensaries in Toronto, have licensed dispensaries in Vancouver, and through some of their locations and with through a safe injection, through an outreach site that they had in the downtown east side of Vancouver, they were offering THC capsules to individuals that would participate in their study. The study looking at if these THC capsules would be an effective substitution for the opiate addiction, for the opiate use that these people have. So I was fortunate enough to connect with Terry after that article, and he's been a very strong proponent in supporting cannabis amnesty. Now, this is just to wrap it up, our team here, just to kind of give them some kudos. I'll kind of start off from Anna Maria Nenajor. She is our campaign director and team lead, fearless team lead. She has a lot on her plate, but she's taking this by the reins and has really been pushing forward for this legislation to happen. And she's been very fortunate to be getting a lot of support from political figures, and I've been very fortunate that she asked me to join the campaign with her. We also have Akwasu Mbepa. He is a He's a professor at U of T, and he is the director of research on our campaign, who has been looking at a lot of the data around how we could appropriately integrate the information that he's gathered into policy that affects positive change. One thing that Kwasi recently wrote a blog article on, which you can find on our website, is around ways to explore using machine learning to dig through the large data sets of conviction records to find and to extrapolate the individuals that have cannabis convictions so that it would expedite the process of not only the implementation of amnesty, but also identifying the individuals affected by it as well. Stephanie DiGiuseppe is the other attorney on our team, and she is responsible for sponsorship as well. So I would definitely say you guys want to stay tuned to our Instagram, our Facebook, and our Twitter accounts, because we have some exciting news that's going to be coming very shortly that Stephanie did some tireless work campaigning on and bringing on board for us. So if you follow us, you'll make sure that you'll get those updates of the news that should be landing, I believe, next week. Rashmi Kumar, she is our social media officer. If you see all the lovely work that we're doing on Twitter and Snapchat, on Instagram, if you reached out to us, she's likely the one that has reached back to you, and she really helps to coordinate a lot of the media for our campaign as well. And then we have Reena Ramprasad. Reena will actually be doing a presentation on this very stage at 5 o'clock today. And she's an amazing cook, so I'll probably be back here to eat some amazing food. But she's our volunteer officer, so whenever we have opportunities to get out in the community, Reena's generally the one that helps us to orchestrate who can help us get people signed on, who can give out buttons, who can give high fives. Usually that's Reena's role, and she's doing it with a massive smile on her face. She'll be Kim. She's our communications officer, so all the lovely glossy pictures and stuff that you see on our website and stuff, she's generally does all the website. She's more functional on that aspect of it. And she creates a lot of the media content that we have. And then lastly, myself, I'm the community outreach officer, so I'm the one that really tries to engage with my contacts within the industry to get them to know what we're doing in the space, to get the support from them. So I'm really working with other groups to get the endorsers, and we're actually going to be having more that we're rolling out and more partnerships that we're rolling out. So it's really great work that we're doing. And one thing is that, all of us doing this work is strictly volunteer-based. We were fortunate enough that Jonathan Zaid and Cam Batley from Aurora made a significant donation to our campaign of $50,000, and all of that is going straight towards a campaign to find ways in which we can help those Canadians that are facing these convictions or currently even have charges, or just seeking amnesty or seeking answers, because it's something that we really feel deeply about. So anybody who contributes afterwards, or all the great announcements that we will be making on other sponsors and contributors that we have, all of that goes right back into the campaign, goes right back into education and finding ways that we could really kind of help our cannabis community and those that have been affected by the war on cannabis, as it was, hopefully ending soon, but that's another story with C46. But yeah, I'd like to thank everybody for listening in, and if you have any other questions, I'll be around. So thank you, guys.
So we do actually have some time for questions if anybody's actually got some, but I've actually got one for you.
Absolutely.
What most people don't realize in Canada is we're very different from the United States. Is in the United States, once you're convicted of a cannabis crime, you're stripped of your rights. You can't vote. Your information is made public, so you're all of a sudden what you were charged with, what you're convicted of, what jail you're at, will all of a sudden become a matter of public record. In Canada, once you're actually convicted of the crime, you're not stripped of your privacy rights. So I've actually done some work with a group called POW 420 in the United States. And one of the things we tried to do a couple of years ago was reach out as part of a letter writing campaign just for people that were serving time in Canadian jails for marijuana crimes. And we found we couldn't find them. there was no way for us to actually reach out to prisoners because we would actually have to go to each individual prison and see if we could get in somewhere through there, and then see if anybody would be willing to talk to us, and then we could be put on a list. There's actually there may be very well in provinces in this country where people are actually in prison right now for a marijuana crime. And there's no one actually lobbying to get them out, and they're actually very difficult to find. Are you guys looking into kind of how to reach out and figure out even who may be serving time now?
Yeah, actually we are. I was able to group Canadian Pardons Association, I might be saying that wrong, has reached out to us. So we're actively trying to engage different groups across the country in every province that have this interest in this cause, so that we can work together to find this data and find these individuals. I would say, to be quite honest, that has been one of the single hardest challenges of our campaign, is finding individuals who have these convictions, and one, showing them that, not only do we want to assist, but part of that is, showing them, or at least trying to get their support in coming into the light and sharing their story.
So the group 420, POW 420 that I talked to, they got a gentleman out a few years ago. They've actually spoken on the stage in the past. Jeff Mazinski had been in prison for 22 years for cannabis crimes, and they were instrumental in helping get him out. And again, like we said, we've reached out to the John Howard Society. Of course, we talked to John Conroy and Alan Young and all the lawyers on our team, saying, how do we find them? And the resounding answer was pretty much, I don't know. So I wish you guys luck with that. If there's anything, I have some people on my team that might be willing to help it, because like I said, we've tried it before, and we hit some roadblocks that maybe you guys with these new resources may be able to knock down.
Yeah, thank you, because I think this is one of those unfortunate situations where it's not a problem that can be solved by technology. It's just going to be solved by good old-fashioned, people on the ground, just
footwork, basically footwork at every jail and prison in this country, trying to figure out whether or not there are people out there that need our help. Like I said, there could be people in other provinces who do not have as a relaxed attitude around cannabis as, say, a city of Toronto, like the city of Toronto is.
Yeah, precisely. I can almost, given the stats that we've seen in terms of the disproportionate arrests, especially in, I would say, very staunch conservative provinces. I'm from the East Coast,
so we see a lot of people that are actually, still going to jail for something as small as an ounce, for at 6 months. Like it's so as we talked about racial disparity, and those are the white kids. So
oh wow,
yeah.
Can you imagine what they're doing to black kids?
Yeah,
Let's be real.
Let's be real. Let's be real. So I mean, I'm not sure if there's anybody else that has any questions. Yes. No.
Well, I'll be around, so I hope you guys enjoy your Karma Cup.
And I actually do have one more question.
Absolutely.
How do people help? How do people join? How do people reach out?
Yes. So again, how everybody can help is go to our website, cannabisamnesty.ca. That's cannabisamnesty.ca. Sign the petition. That would be amazing. Share your cannabis story. How has it affected you personally? How is it as a business that'll affect you? Because amnesty from an economic standpoint is better, for our country if we provide it to these individuals. So if you want to share a story on that, that would be amazing. And as well, on social media platforms, you can find us, Cannabis Amnesty, generally, and on Facebook, Campaign for Cannabis Amnesty. Please engage with us, like our comments, share it, let us know how you feel, your sentiments. This is something where we're trying to get as much traction and exposure and groundswell. So the more engagement that we can have with everybody, every Canadian, the more opportunity we have to get in government's face and to show them that this has to be done.
Awesome. So a big round of applause for Tyler James from Cannabis Amnesty. Thank you so much for your time. And we're going to take a short break while we wait for our next speaker to get here. Yes.